Every era has its defining transformation. Ours is the rise of intelligence, where data connects the world and AI reshapes every decision we make. But as machines grow smarter, it's our humanity that must grow stronger, because technology doesn't define progress. Leadership does.
WILDA is the world's premier forum for leadership in AI, bringing together global executives and industry pioneers to shape a fair digital world through collaboration, knowledge exchange, and thought leadership in data, digital, and AI. We believe the future of AI must be guided by empathy, ethics, and inclusion, where every algorithm reflects fairness and every leader drives impact with integrity. From New York to Singapore, from boardrooms to innovation labs, WILDA brings together the world's most forward-thinking leaders to share ideas, challenge boundaries, and turn possibility into progress. We build communities that empower. We create conversations that spark action. We lead with conscience, collaboration, and courage. The future isn't written by algorithms. It is shaped by people who choose to lead differently. People who combine intelligence with compassion, innovation with integrity, and data with purpose. We are the world leaders in data and AI. Together, we are designing a world that is intelligent, inclusive, and deeply human.
Welcome to the AI Talk Show on LinkedIn Live. Welcome to all of you for having real conversation about real stories. I'm Asha Saxena, founder and CEO of WILDA, World Leaders in Data and AI. This is where AI really gets real. Every episode, we try to bring together leaders who are shaping how AI is transforming business, leadership, and society, not just in theory, but in practice, in organizations, and really making an impact. Today's topic is one of the, I believe, the massively underestimated topic. We talk about AI in applications, the outcomes, the ROI, but really where AI is making an impact and can make an impact is AI-powered ERP outcomes. For years, ERP systems were viewed as operational infrastructure. They're necessary, but they're invisible. When we think about financial systems or procurement systems, supply chain systems, systems of record, but AI is changing that completely. We, again, talk about the applications, but really think about ERP now becoming a system of intelligence, a system that doesn't just document the business, but actively shaping our business outcome. So AI can now identify supply chain disruption before humans can. It does give the promise of predicting operational bottleneck, optimizing inventory decisions. And we hear a lot about detecting process inefficiencies, right? So it's all about how do we really create efficiencies using AI, improving customer response time, and also uncover new revenue opportunity. And I talk about this in the AI factor, is how AI could be really an impact on, as an optimizer, creating efficiencies, extender to create new opportunities and extend your markets. And also think about being an innovator where you can innovate systems. But really, the best part of AI is when it can create and recreate new business models. AI is exposing so many organizations are now looking at how to digitalize the broken processes, like rethink about your processes as you think about AI. So today we're going to talk about what actually is happening with AI as it enters our ERP environment. And I think I'm excited because it's not only about the opportunities, but also talking about the friction points, talking about the leadership shifts, and where we are heading next with ERP. I couldn't think of anyone better than having the guest today, Navendra Bhatt, Nav, the CTO and data and AI enabler at Oracle. Nav has spent his career at the intersection of enterprise transformation, ERP, data, and AI across organizations, including McKinsey, IBM, Capgemini, Accenture, and now at Oracle. So Nav, welcome to the AI Talk Show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Asha. It's good to be here. And yes, the topic is timely and very exciting. So I can't wait to talk to you about it.
You know, Nav, you've spent your career in last few decades working with ERP systems. Can you talk a little bit about your background from where you started and where you are here, so we can have a little context about the real discussion we're going to have about AI-powered ERP?
Absolutely, yes. I don't want to sound too old, not few decades, couple of decades I've spent in ERP. I've started in the ERP, back when ERP was green and black screens. So it's not that old. It's about 20 years old. But the biggest shift I have seen, so we've seen ERP going from black screen to HTML to cloud, and now the AI-enabled ERP, right? And a lot of this is very basic, right? So ERP has always been, like you said, it's always been, answering the question, what happened, right? So I call it retrospective compliance, right? ERP was used as a filing cabinet. It was always an expensive filing cabinet. You put data into, like you said, procurement system, finance system, supply chain systems. Whenever you need it, you take the report out and you make sure that the system is recording the data correctly.
Right.
So the previous value of ERP was the compliance and the accuracy of the data, right? Did the numbers reconcile? Can we tell the auditors that we are good, right? And the KPI, the key performance indicator of the ERP was that auditors were happy or not. Can we report it in a timely manner or not, right? In the last 3 years or so, when I started noticing, a lot of leaders, and I've done Oracle, I've done SAP, I've done Salesforce. A lot of leaders were spending, high 8-figure in the ERP implementation. It was always generally a multi-year effort. They make investments, but when they want to ask questions about very basic stuff, which customers are the most profitable? Where is my inventory? What is my inventory costing? I don't know if you guys have seen a Steve Jobs interview, right? What is the Macintosh costing? He was not able to answer with the ERP, so he changed the system. Now AI is changing the system. What AI is doing is it's using the data to create insights, right? So now what we can do, the ERPs can do, is it can tell you, it can answer the question, what is coming, as opposed to what happened. And that's the biggest shift from retrospective compliance to predictive insights. And I don't want to say that it's because of technology. The shift is not technological. The shift is also philosophical. The leaders want to know, leaders want ERP to tell them where we are headed or what comes next, and how can we shape our business better to make it more profitable, make it more valuable, generate more revenue, etc. And I think that is the shift that I have seen in the last 3 years.
No, I agree with you completely. I think we started, I started in this industry about 3 decades back, and I've seen that technology was a cost center where you really are putting the data in databases, using SQL to query the database, to really now just having a data warehouse, and remember the queries taking a long time to give you the results, right? And now then ERP was the magic answer that let's get everything in ERP and be able to manage our business and the whole era of SAP and Oracle's that really started becoming the backbone for every single business. And now with AI, it's not just about the IT system. It's not just about having the system providing you a consolidated data, but actually helping you predict and give you direction so you know where the direction is. I mean, I talked to my CFO and I was having a conversation with him yesterday, and I said, I just don't need the numbers. I need to know where the business is going and what decision would be the right decision to make. And I think that's what every business leader is looking for when they're looking at AI. And that's what AI is giving the promise, is that I can now do the prediction. I can do the right prediction. I can actually give you the insight. So I agree with you completely that the whole shift, it's an interesting shift that companies are, saying instead of collecting the data, now it's forcing AI to ask, AI is helping force organization to ask much harder questions. Can the enterprise actually create intelligence from the data they have?
Right.
You've described the shift really well, but what I want to kind of dig deeper or double click on is moving from the system of record to system of outcome. I love maybe if you can unpack a little bit about this is like a most important shift that's happening in enterprise technology right now. What does the system of outcome actually look like in practice? You are in organizations and you're seeing this happen. What do you see?
Absolutely, yes. And that's a very, very right way to put it, right? System of record to system of outcome. A lot of, like at Oracle, we are doing that as well, right? But a lot of times, let's understand first what is a system of record, right?
Right.
System of record is what I described earlier, is like a filing cabinet, right?
Mm-hmm.
It tells you what happened because it records all your data. A purchase order was raised? Yes, it was raised. Is the shipment here? Yes, the shipment is here. And if you double click it underneath that application and look at the architecture, the data models, the workflows, the integrations, they were all built to make sure that whatever you are recording is accurate and it's retrievable, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was not valuable. It is absolutely valuable because it created the foundation of what we are calling the system of outcome today. The problem is, and I think you described it very well, right? We always made predictions in the business. Every business always made prediction. Go back all the way to, Ford creating the car, right?
Right.
They made predictions. It was, the predictions were never a problem. The predictions were always based on hunches and very fragmented historical data. What AI is doing is it is changing that now.
Yeah.
Because the business always asks the question, what should we do now? Right? I mean, that's not a new question. It's always a question that they ask. What AI is doing and very heavy compute power is doing is it is giving you a very easy way to found your predictions in data. So
Right.
everything that data is telling, you can create predictions, simulations, etc., based on the data, right? And there was a term that we used in a oil and gas space, right? It's called digital twin, right?
Yeah.
What AI is doing is AI is creating multiple digital twins of the business. And what it's letting you do is it is creating the outcome before the outcome is there, right? So it's basically an envision outcome space for you. So can I cut this supplier? Can I double source or dual source this item? Is that supplier going to go out of business? Is tomorrow something going to happen, right? And you can create a data found outcome based on using the AI. And I think that is the biggest change that you are happening right now. So ERP is not the ledger anymore. What ERP is doing is it's advising you, right? Now, like I said earlier, right, it is not something that is happening automatically, right? If you don't have the right data, if you don't have the right processes, if you don't have the right governance, if you don't have the right leadership,
That's right.
all of this is not going to work, right?
Exactly.
But the system of record to system of outcome shift is already happening. The right
Right.
organizations have made that shift already.
You know, it's so true what you just said is that it is true that technology can only do so much. Having the right processes, having the right system is really critical. One thing I keep hearing also from leaders is that AI is almost like a flashlight inside organizations. Suddenly, companies are seeing the inefficiencies they didn't realize existed before. You know, processes people assumed were optimized turned out to be highly fragmented. Data quality issues surfacing now more so, and manual workarounds are appearing to be everywhere. So, so sometimes I think that becomes uncomfortable and kind of issues that organizations are discovering. They're starting to layer AI into the ERP systems. What are you seeing? What kind of issues? What kind of leadership teams, and how are they reacting to these realities that are becoming visible? You know, and because there are issues that are coming out, which were hidden under the ERP systems before.
Yes, absolutely. So when I spoke to the C-suite of my clients, right, 10 out of 10 wants to include AI in what they will do next year, next 3 years, etc. Right? And it seemed like it's a shiny object, right? When I was back in the day, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, everybody wanted to use blockchain, right? Everybody wanted to use digital twin, etc. Right? So, shiny objects always gets the executive teams excited, right? You used AI and you called it flashlight. I call it a mirror, right? And a lot of times you see in the mirror, and your organizational processes, your data, your outcomes, they are not as flattering as you wanted it to be, right? And I put my clients into two separate categories, right? And two very distinct categories. And what you said is absolutely right. AI is exposing the inefficiency, right? What I've seen in my clients is, about half of the purchase orders were created after the goods were received because they had a policy of no receiving, no PO. If you don't have a PO, you can't receive, right? You could easily do miscellaneous receipts and things like that. But, organizational started putting controls on receiving. So POs were created after the goods were received, right? This is very common. The example that I'm about to give you is most of the time, when do month-end, year-end, quarter-end closes, about half of those processes and reports were Excel-driven. Although they had ERP, they have enterprise performance management, EPM systems, they have consolidation systems, so on and so forth. But half of the work was done using Excel workarounds that were not connected to the ERP at all, right? Now, AI is going to expose that, right? And what is happening is the first set of the organizations, they say, well, we are now finding out that we've been running these processes for years. They've been working just fine. It's AI's fault that they are broken. That's one thing, one set of organizations. It's very human reactions, right? What we have done has worked in the past. When AI came, it broke. So the factor that changed is AI, means it's AI's fault. It's not unnatural reaction, right? The other set of organizations are, oh, we are now finding out that we were doing things in a work around way or not an organic way after spending, tens and fifties of millions of dollars on ERP. We were not using ERP to its fullest. Now, if I put AI on top of it, I can do much better. If I fix my data, if I fix my data model, if I fix my processes, if I fix my governance, and they see as an opportunity as opposed to an excuse. And they say that, oh, finally we have a reason to change. we can now fix it and we can take advantage of it in an exponential way. And I think those are the organizations that are going to succeed in the AI space. So, like you said, there is a discomfort, right? Discomfort is temporary. The clarity you get out of it is permanent. And the
Right.
organizations that are going to lean into that discomfort are the ones that are going to end up really competitive.
I think you touched upon a very important piece, which is the change. It's the culture. Everybody's very comfortable. I mean, I can't believe we are having this conversation even now. The love for Excel. We've been talking about Excel for how many years? People who are addicted to Excel, they stick with Excel or the SQL. And now suddenly you have this big change that AI is going to bring out all these inefficiencies, and the people who are still working with the old age systems, are going to be exposed. But I want to actually touch upon another really important element, which is the value. A lot of people talk about value. We need to change the way we think about or reframe AI value also. There's still a perception that AI is primarily for cost reduction story.
Yes.
I'm speaking at so many conferences and I run workshops. And when I ask the question, who's using AI for optimization, I would say about 60 to 70% of the room raises their hand for that. But you think about the organization moving faster, are increasingly thinking about growth, responsiveness, forecasting accuracy. Customer experience is another big one, or building new business models are another a good use case. But it's not just efficiency. So can you share some examples where AI integrating into ERP genuinely has moved to revenue needle or created measurable business value beyond operational savings? Have you seen that in any of your clients? Are there any real examples?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? But I think the point you raised is very, very valid, right? With all these layoffs and things like that, AI is, I would say, blamed for creating efficiency and cost-cutting tool, right? And yes, absolutely, AI reduces manual effort. It catches the errors earlier. But if that's the whole story that an IT leader or a business leader telling their business, I think it's a very limiting story, right? The value is, yes, in the cost cutting, but the value, like you said, is creating new buying center, creating new opportunities to run your business. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? One example is a CPRD company, consumer products retail distribution company that I was involved with, right? And it's an anomaly, but their data was pretty solid. They have spent a lot of money and effort on making sure that the data was accurate. So their ERP was solid, orders, customers, inventory, pricing history, pricing changes. All of that data was pretty good, right? And they had created extensions to the ERP to improve the customer experience, right? Think like Amazon, right? You can easily find out where your stuff is when you order it, when it's going to come, etc., right? And in customer experience, those things are very, very important, right? But what was happening is they still had good data but fragmented data. So if I have a territory, my data is visible to my territory manager. That data is then summarized and visible into the super territory managers and the state managers and so on and so forth, right? So the true data is available per territory. Once it goes up, it starts getting summarized. When we put data on top of it, an AI on top of it, the real visibility of the real true data by customer, by products, by pricing, by adjoining products, and so on and so forth, has clearly exposed to the entire company. And what they started doing is, oh, I am selling this product or this set of product to my customer. The same set of products were sold as a group to another customer in a different territory. Product combinations were created. they started finding out that this particular customer segments are buying these particular products in this time. And that's when the seasonality details that started coming up. They also started understanding that when these category spends start reducing, that means my customer is shifting to another competitor, right? So once the AI layer came in, they started finding out not only cost saving opportunity, but they started finding out upselling opportunity. They started finding out cross-selling opportunity. They started finding out this customer is related to that customer. So with the reference of this customer, I can go to other customer and created new buying centers. And all of this created about 17 to 20% revenue uplift, not
Right.
cost cutting, revenue uplift in the company, right? That was one example. The other example was one of the largest ATM servicing companies, right? We put AI on their service data and gave them 40% efficiency on servicing, which is the cost saving part. What it did was every time certain repairs happened or certain temperature was happening, ATMs were going down. Certain outage was happening in certain parts of the world, and the network was going down. They started creating a repair program that they were able to sell to other banks because they were seeing the same type of things. And because of this trend, they were able to capture 11% more market share from other companies because they did not have this foresight because of the AI.
Right. That's incredible. Those are the incredible stories that actually inspire you to actually jump right in. You hear about all the fear for AI right now in the organization, but when you start seeing the results, and that's why I think the value is so important, the outcomes are so important, that when you start seeing these outcomes, that gives you hope that you really need to jump in and adopt the new technology.
Yep.
So thank you for sharing that. I think those are really interesting stories, and things, that use cases that organizations or leaders who are listening right now could actually jump in and start thinking about how to implement that in their own organization. When you hear about just the ERP upgrades and the amount of time it takes just on the back end,
Yes.
is something which I've heard nightmare stories from
Yes.
the tech organization. And then on top of that, you add using AI on top of it, and the whole cultural shift. It is not easy. I mean, it truly
Yes.
is not. How do you respond to that when the CIOs are talking to you, over a drink or coffee, about how they're struggling, just the whole upgrade nightmare?
Yeah, I think so. Look, there are a couple of things, right? One, and I would not call it upgrade in terms of the ERPs, right? Because now the AI tools have been so sophisticated that you can even use your legacy data and create and put AI on top of it and create insights and outcomes and things like that. Yes, there are limitations to it, but
Yeah.
several companies are out there who would put AI tools or AI layer on top of your semantic layer and then use the historical data. And that's where I do see the real problem that's coming out, right? I think we talked about, seeing in the mirror.
Yeah.
And when you see, the data that comes out or the insights that come out, if that insight is based on bad data, because, these ERPs, like you said, right, they have been in the organization for a very long time. They create that bad data in the system, right? And people don't generally take time to clean that data because when you're implementing ERP, your focus is on the implementation of the
That's
ERP
right.
and migrating the data, right? And we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, right? The accuracy of the data was very important, right? So as long as I can match the historical data to the new data after the upgrade or the new ERP, I'm good, right? So the garbage that was in, it is my job as an implementer to match those garbage in the new system because I have to reconcile the data, right?
Right.
That's the whole point of data migration, that my traditional ERP has to match my new ERP, right? And I think those things are very, very limiting. The process is a lot of times, because they are so expensive, most organizations don't try to do process transformation.
Right.
They want to make sure that, oh, if I'm taking the orders in these 10 steps, go ahead and mirror those 10 steps. And those organizations typically are not very successful. I would not call it a transformation with a big T, right? They are upgrading the system, like you asked the question, right?
Right.
And I think the expensive part is cleaning the data, optimizing the processes, putting the governance that you need, putting the leadership on making decisions in the system. And I think those are the things that become a lot more valuable
Right.
to those leaders than just upgrading the system, right? So once you do that and then put AI on top of it, I think that's when you will see the real value of those things.
I agree with you. I think it's so much easier to go get a tool, but really, what is the framework? What's the principle? What are the leadership requirements, the guardrails, the governance? That becomes really critical. To
Yep.
that, I actually want to shift the conversation to the major shift. Another major shift that I'm seeing happening right now is organizational. The
Hmm.
CIO, CDO, CAIO,
Hmm.
the operational leaders, all of these worlds are converging. So this
Yes.
whole how it's all coming together, AI is forcing organization to rethink ownership, accountability, the governance we are talking about, the decision making structures. And when you think about the enterprise customers that you talk to, what do leaders still misunderstand about relationship between ERP, data, and AI? And what conversations should executive teams should be having right now that many still are not having?
Yeah. So if you take a step back and understand, what are these roles, right? So there is a role called CIO or CTO, right? What is the job of a CIO or CTO? And I'm generalizing, so I
Right.
apologize to the leaders that are more uh, evolved or forthcoming, right? But typical job of a CIO or CTO is to make sure that the lights stay on, right? My systems are operational, they are accurate, they pass the audit, and my business users can use it without having a lot of problems, right? That's the typical job of the CIO, right? And obviously, in the last 4 years or so, after all these hacking incidents that happened, the security is part of the CIO job. If you are not a financial service companies, some trading houses, etc., they have a chief security officer,
Yes.
right? So if I put that security side aside, and I think that's a topic in itself that AI is triggering, but let's put it in the parking lot for a second, right? So CIO, CTO role, KTLO, keep the lights on job, right? There is a chief data officer.
Mm-hmm.
Chief data officer's job is what? To make sure that the data is synchronized, the data model is there, and sometimes it extends to the reporting, right? So my reporting and the insights are done well, right? So you talk about CIO, you talk about CDO, you talk about CDO, which is Chief Data Officer,
Yes.
and now you put Chief AI Officer, right? So what does Chief AI Officer do? Oh, it does everything else, right? My AI should work. Well, how does AI work if you don't have the processes and the systems that are not unable to use AI? Your data is not there. And
Right.
I think what the boards and the CEOs have started finding out is there is a lot of finger pointing happening, right?
Right.
CIO is a high paying role that went in and said, well, I tried, AI failed, it didn't work, right? And if you look at the latest report that came from McKinsey, is 90% of the AI projects fail, right? And I think
Right.
Howard did some study on that as well, right? And that there was a lot of finger pointing, right? And it's not one person's fault or other person's fault. It's just that it's the evolution that was done that way, right? Now think about the progressive organizations, and I'm giving you an example of I think there was a bank in Australia that said no, nothing doing. We are going to combine all of these roles. The CIO, the CDO, and the CAIO are all in the same role. One person is responsible for all of these things, because ultimately providing the right system, the right data, the right reporting, and the right prediction is job of one department. And you can call it anything you want, right? I don't exactly remember what they called it, but it's critical that that role becomes the center point of all of these four things in the organization, right? And fundamentally it's a strategy role. It's not an operational role, right? Because your data architecture has to support and become a competitive advantage. Your AI has to predict and simulate and operationalize the cost savings and the revenue value that you are creating, right? And I think that is the biggest shift that I'm seeing, right? That AI is fundamentally changing the operational IT role into a business strategy or a strategic role into the boardrooms.
I agree with you completely. And I think I do a lot of board readiness training and workshops, and I see boards wanting AI strategy. They are looking at AI as a growth strategy or compliance and risk assessment strategy. So really thinking about, and there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of pressure for organizations to move quickly. Investors are asking for AI strategies. Every enterprise wants to start showing some kind of momentum. In fact, in the startup world, if you put AI, they get more investment. So if you don't have AI in your core business operation, even the startup can't raise capital. So speed but the worry for me is, and a lot of us talk about, is that you're thinking about speed, but there's no clarity. If you don't have clarity, that can create technology or governance risk or just the architecture. What is a fragmented architecture, and how are we going to fix those fragmented architecture or failed adoption? How do you really succeed? So if you were advising a chief data or AI officer who's preparing to launch AI-powered ERP initiative maybe tomorrow, what is one mistake you would strongly caution them against?
So I would do 1A and 1B, right?
Right.
So that I think we've talked a lot about the importance of process intelligence and the data, right?
Yeah.
Bad data foundation and bad process foundation is not a good recipe for AI, right? So if you are greenlighting an initiative, and I'm not saying go boil the ocean. I've actually told all of my clients, do not boil the ocean, right? Because it doesn't help, right? Because you will always find some bad data, some bad processes somewhere, right? So I think it's a typical crawl, walk, run concept, right? Don't boil the ocean. Find out the easiest place where you would have good data and good processes. I have seen procurement is one that generally works very well.
Yeah.
I have seen general ledger is generally work very well, because typically there is not a whole lot of process variation in both of these processes, right? So make sure that you get your data quality and the process is right? So that's 1A for me, right? The other piece that I've consistently told my customer is, don't underestimate the change management, right? The leaders that have come from an IT background or from a technology background, they typically underestimate the people aspect, the change management aspects of it. And I think don't underestimate. I would advise them to not underestimate the change aspect, because a lot of times what AI is going to do is it's going to tell you that this is not right. This needs change. right?
Right.
And a lot of times it is also going to tell you what needs to happen, in the change. And if you don't have people who are willing adopters of that change, then you are always going to find resistance in the system. And then, like I said earlier, AI is creating this friction, and AI is not good. And I think
Right.
those two things, if you do it right, a lot of times AI projects will see a yield a lot of value in your organization.
I agree with you. I mean, I've seen implemented, if you implement it right, you can totally see the value in it. I mean, a lot of the consumer product goods company are upselling through their AI chatbots products. We were talking about that earlier. So the
Yep.
value definitely is there. But I think there's so many little pieces that need to be fixed. And there's so many heartaches as you are going through this implementation, but it's all about people. A lot of it is about people.
Yes.
So we've talked about operational intelligence. We've talked about leadership transformation, why that is so important. I think the process redesign that we spoke about, I think, is a critical piece. And also the whole AI-driven outcome, which, the value, what are we really producing? But in many ways, it still feels like we're at the beginning. If you
Yes.
look ahead, though, let's look ahead 3 years from now. What does ERP landscape is going to look like? Are we still looking at some recognizable enterprise system, or we are moving forward with something completely different now?
Yeah, if you think about and listen to the leaders like Satya, um, and some other executives, right? They have said that the ERP will not exist, right? And obviously, yes, there is an opinion out there that ERP will not exist in 3 to 5 years, right? What I feel is ERP will probably continue to exist as a category. That it's the roots are so deep that it's very difficult to get rid of it completely, right? It might become unrecognizable, right?
Yeah.
So what do I mean by that? There is currently a boundary, and I think you started this conversation saying, "Oh, ERP was operational," and so on and so forth, right? So if you think about ERP was a transactional system, right?
Yes.
And it still is basically a transactional system. Now, there is a transactional system. Then a lot of um, companies have created what we call data lakes or data platforms or so on and so forth, because the ERPs were so fragmented. We had multiple ERPs. Now, they needed to have a data platform. So if you think about it, there is an ERP, there is a data platform, and then there is an AI layer on top of it, right? So if you think about those three sort of systematic paradigms, I think a lot of those are going to start blurring between each other, right? So a lot of times you are going to have what we now started calling is an agentic ERP, right? So you will have an ERP that is a single source of truth across entire organization, not multiple ERPs, but one ERP that is sitting in the entire organization doing all of those things.
Right.
And it will be AI enabled. So, the new implementations that we are seeing, people are actively asking us that how can I design my procurement process to take advantage of the latest AI agents? How can I design my manufacturing process so that I can have a low touch manufacturing or a no touch manufacturing? In Mexico, we created a small production facility that is a completely no touch facility for manufacturing. Now, not all the organizations are going to be there, but the evolution of the agentic ERP is going to start working in that direction, right? And most of the human in the loop is basically not doing the work, but checking the work.
Right.
I think that is where things are going to happen, right? The agents will execute the actions. They will automatically sort of rebalance the inventory, trigger the procurement based on the signals, sell your work using this automatic chatbot, answer the questions of where is my shipment, automatically, etc. And the human role becomes one for an oversight, exception management, high value management, and so on and so forth.
I agree with you. I think the shift towards really the central truth using AI focusing on the value becomes really critical. Last question, Nav. This is my favorite question on the show. Every leader watching right now is navigating these extraordinary changes. AI transformation, workforce shifts. I mean, we hear about that in the news every single day. The governance pressure is real. The data complexity, the operational disruption. I mean, these are all what we are dealing with every single day. But if you could leave if you could, just talk about every enterprise, the AI and data leader with one message today, what would it be? And especially for our LinkedIn user, what would be one message you would leave us today for the AI and data leaders?
I would strongly encourage them to not wait, right? Stop waiting for certainty. There is no such thing as perfect data. There is no such thing as perfect process. Yes, the longer you wait, the further the train is going, right? If you're still waiting, the train has already left the platform, right?
That's true.
You don't need perfect data strategy. You don't need perfect process strategy. You don't need perfect governance strategy. But if you don't start and learn from it, then it's always going to be what I call academic, right? Building AI literacy, absolutely important. There is no way about it. But if you continue to wait and learn, then it becomes a liability. Like my PhD advisor used to tell me, the longer you, at some point, the longer you continue to do your literature review, it's a waste of time, right? Because at some point, waiting and watching becomes a liability for you, right? So one message, stop waiting for certainty. There is no perfect way to start it, but there is a way to start it. So
Right.
Start small. You might fail a couple of times because that's what it is, right? It is going to take some time for you to align your processes, align your data, and learn from AI. If you're still waiting, don't wait. Start working on AI right now.
I love that. I think, they said, the more you wait, the more you think about it, you're never going to start. So really start small, create small wins. And this is such a thoughtful conversation. For me, what stands out really through our conversation is that ERP is no longer just operational infrastructure, even though I started my conversation by saying, it was operational infrastructure, but no longer, because it's becoming an intelligent layer for the enterprises. And organizations that are succeeding won't simply be the ones that adopt AI tool fastest, but they're also thinking about and rethinking about how the decisions are made, how processes operate, how humans and intelligent systems are working together. And that's the real transformation. Thank you for joining us, Nav. I really appreciate all your insight. And thank you everybody who's watching the AI Talk Show. I think these discussions become really meaningful because we engage with our audience. It's conversation like this, and also what we talk about in Wilda World Leaders in Data and AI. I think it's really bringing together senior leaders who are shaping the future of enterprise AI leadership and innovation. I think that's first time, and I feel like, Nav, in our careers, we are here that we're writing history. I mean, how we are building these systems and how we are showing up matters. So thank you so much, Nav. I really appreciate you coming here.
Thank you. Glad to be part of it, and thanks for the invitation.
This is Asha Saxena, your host. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.